The wind rolled down from the Bitterroot peaks, cold as a preacher's whisper. On that road of dust and frost rode two brothers who hadn't shared a fire in nearly 3 years. Elijah McCrae, 38, silent and hard-eyed, carried the weight of a man who'd seen too much sky and too little mercy. Behind him, Caleb McCrae, 35, wild grin beneath his hat brim, rode like a man chasing a ghost he couldn't name. The frontier had carved both of them, but in opposite directions. One found faith in stillness, the other in the barrel of his gun. As they crossed the timber bridge into Bitterroot Crossing, the world seemed to hold its breath. For in that moment, history bent toward blood and reckoning. Bitterroot Crossing had changed little since the war. A scatter of wooden shacks, a church with a leaning cross, and a saloon that never slept. Elijah dismounted with the grace of a tired soldier, while Caleb's boots hit the ground like the start of trouble. The town's eyes followed them. Sons of the Valley returned to a place that had forgotten how to forgive. May Delaney's heart stirred at the sight, torn between what was and what could never be again. Inside the copper lantern, laughter dimmed as the McCrae brothers entered. The smell of whiskey, pine oil, and coal smoke hung thick in the air. Caleb tossed a coin on the bar. The sound rang sharp as judgment. Elijah met Mai's eyes, and the years between them vanished like vapor on cold glass. Sheriff Cutter entered, silence trailing behind him. His boots echoed on the floorboards as if marking time to some unseen clock. "McCrae's back in town," he muttered, not to anyone in particular. The air thickened. Everyone knew peace in Bitterroot was as fragile as glass. That night, frost crept over the roofs, while the saloon's lanterns burned late. Two brothers sat apart, the silence between them heavy as an unspoken verdict. Outside, the river whispered beneath the bridge. The same bridge they'd crossed that morning, before destiny began to take aim. By morning, the sky hung low with bruised clouds. Inside the copper lantern, a piano stumbled through a hymn no one cared to finish. Caleb McCrae leaned on the bar, cards fanned in his hand, sweat glistening along his temple despite the cold. Across the room, Elijah watched, not as a brother, but as a man who'd seen this road end before. Debt had a scent on Caleb. It was whiskey and regret. May moved between them, her voice soft but her eyes sharp, sensing how close the air had come to snapping. Sheriff Cutter sat in the corner, hat tilted low, knowing that what was about to break had been waiting years to do so. Caleb slammed his hand on the table, laughter rough and reckless. "Luck's got a taste for me today," he said, though everyone knew luck had long turned its back. The gambler opposite him smirked, a man with the kind of eyes that measured lives in dollars. Elijah rose from his chair, slow and deliberate, like a storm cloud gathering weight. May whispered, "Caleb, don't." But the warning came too late. Pride was louder than love. The first shove came like a spark. Chairs scraped, boots thudded, and the piano fell silent. Elijah caught Caleb's wrist mid-swing, strength meeting fury. "You've got nothing left to prove," Elijah said through his teeth. Caleb tore free, rage glinting in his eyes. "That's where you're wrong, brother," he hissed. "I've still got you to beat." The room froze. Even the air seemed to recoil from the sound of that word. Outside, rain began to fall. Slow at first, then heavy enough to drown the music inside. Sheriff Cutter's voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, McCrae's." But the storm had already crossed the threshold. Elijah stepped back, jaw clenched, the echo of years behind his silence. Caleb laughed, a hard, empty sound that didn't belong to joy. The thunder outside answered him. By nightfall, Bitterroot Crossing slept uneasy. Caleb stumbled from the saloon, soaked and swearing at the heavens. Elijah watched from the doorway, the rain washing dust and memory from his boots. May followed, her voice trembling. "Don't let it come to this." Elijah said nothing. Some fates he knew, didn't wait for words to find them. In the distance, a wolf's cry echoed, long, mournful, and much too close. By the next morning, the storm had passed, but its silence felt like judgment. May Delaney stood at her window, watching the mist lift off the valley. She could see Elijah by the livery, his hands steady as he brushed down his horse. Caleb was nowhere in sight, and that absence throbbed like a wound. May had tried to believe love could mend what blood had broken, but in the thin light of day she saw the truth some hearts were too proud to heal. In her dresser lay a letter, sealed and yellowed at the edges. Elijah's handwriting, meant for her years ago, never opened until now. The letter's words were simple, but they cut deep. "If I ever find peace, it'll be with you." May pressed the paper to her chest, tears gathering though she fought them. Caleb had found it first, days ago, and it had changed everything. His laughter, once reckless, now came sharp with bitterness. That morning he stumbled into the saloon, eyes bloodshot, clutching that same letter, torn at the edges. "He wrote this to you," he said, voice cracked, "while I was out bleeding for him." The crowd turned. Elijah stepped through the doorway, like a man walking into his own reckoning. The fight didn't come as an explosion, but a slow burn. Words sharper than knives, silences heavier than gunfire. "You always had to have what was mine," Caleb spat. Elijah's jaw set, his eyes hollow. "She was never yours to lose," he said quietly. May's breath caught. The words echoed like a church bell struck at midnight. Sheriff Cutter reached for his badge out of habit. But even he knew there was no law for what was about to happen. Later, as dusk bled across the valley, Elijah stood alone behind the livery. The letter, now creased and wet from rain, burned slowly in his hand. Its ashes rose into the twilight like lost prayers. He whispered May's name once, not as a curse, but as a benediction. Somewhere down the street, a door slammed. Caleb's boots echoed against the mud, heading for the edge of town. Two paths, once one, now diverged forever. That night, May sat alone in her empty saloon. The lanterns had burned low, the piano silent. She ran her fingers across the bar top, where Elijah once sat, her heart torn between the man she loved and the man she doomed. When the door creaked open, she didn't look up. She knew whose footsteps they were. Caleb stood there, eyes wild, voice hoarse. "Tell me you never loved him," he said. May closed her eyes. "I can't." The words were quiet, but they broke everything. Dawn rose thin and colorless over Bitterroot Crossing, the kind of morning that carried no mercy. Word had spread before the sun. The McRae brothers were set to meet at the edge of town. No seconds, no witnesses, just blood and pride to settle what love had torn apart. Sheriff Cutter stood by his window, coffee cooling untouched, wondering how men who'd survived war could fall to something as small as jealousy. May sat alone. Dress wrinkled from a sleepless night, hands clasped so tight they'd gone pale. Across the valley, two horses waited, and the world held still as if it too feared what sunrise would bring. Elijah rode slow, the sound of hooves muffled by frost. He wasn't a man given to speeches or oaths. The quiet between each breath was his confession. When he reached the field, Caleb was already waiting, his black mare restless beneath him. They dismounted without a word. The brothers faced each other across 20 paces of open dirt, the same ground they'd played on as boys, now to be stained by what they'd become. Caleb spoke first, his voice hoarse and hollow. "You took everything, brother. Even the silence ain't yours to leave me." Elijah's reply came soft, almost prayerful. "I took nothing you didn't give away." The air between them trembled. In that moment they were boys again, racing through fields, laughing before the world demanded blood for every joy. Then Caleb's hand moved, and the spell shattered. May ran into the street when she heard the first shot. The sound cut through the valley like scripture. She stopped short of the field, the wind whipping her hair, eyes fixed on two figures in the distance. A long silence followed, longer than any moment had a right to be. Then a second shot cracked, and the world exhaled. Sheriff Cutter stepped from his doorway, hat lowered, and began the slow walk toward the sound of the end. When the dust cleared, Elijah stood trembling, gun still raised. Caleb lay on the ground, breath shallow, eyes wide in disbelief. Elijah fell to his knees beside him, voice breaking. "I never wanted this." Caleb's lips moved, but no sound came. Just the faint curve of a smile, as if forgiveness lived somewhere beyond words. The wind lifted a handful of dust and carried it over them both. Above, the sun broke free of the clouds, indifferent and eternal. The valley lay hushed, the sun rising slow over the Bitterroot peaks. Time itself seemed to hesitate, caught between mercy and memory. Elijah stood over his brother's body, eyes unfocused, gun hanging heavy in his hand. The echo of the shot still clung to the ridges, a single sound too vast to fade. In that frozen silence, Elijah felt every mile of road that had led them here. He thought of the war, of nights they'd shared one blanket against the snow, of promises whispered before the world hardened them. Now, there was nothing left but the truth, that blood could bind and betray with the same strength. Sheriff Cutter arrived first. His boots sank into the wet ground, the sound muffled, respectful. He said nothing, just knelt, checked Caleb's pulse, and exhaled through his nose. "Didn't have to end this way," he muttered, though he knew the words were only wind. Elijah looked at him, eyes hollow, lips trembling. "I tried to keep him from the fire," he said. Cutter nodded slowly. "Son, some men are born, already burning." May reached them just as the clouds swallowed the sun again. Her steps faltered when she saw the truth before her. Kneeling, she brushed mud from Caleb's cheek with trembling fingers. Then her eyes lifted to Elijah, and in them was both forgiveness and ruin. "He loved you," she whispered. Elijah's voice cracked. "And you?" May didn't answer. Instead, she leaned down and kissed Caleb's brow, tears falling into the dirt. The rain came harder, washing the blood into the soil. Sheriff Cutter covered Caleb's body with his coat, the gesture gentle, almost reverent. Elijah turned away, his face slick with rain, not knowing if it was tears or water. May rose slowly, her dress clinging to her knees, hair plastered to her face. "What happens now?" she asked. Cutter stared into the gray horizon. "Now, the story starts its dying." When the rain stopped, the world looked scrubbed clean, though nothing truly was. Elijah mounted his horse without a word. He looked once more at May, their eyes meeting in the cold quiet. No words passed. None could hold what was left between them. He turned his horse toward the mountains and rode on, disappearing into the fog. Behind him, Bitterroot Crossing returned to silence, the duel already shifting into legend. Some said the valley never thawed quite the same again. Weeks passed and Bitterroot Crossing fell quiet again, the kind of quiet that clings to walls and lingers in dreams. Sheriff Cutter wrote the report himself, one line at a time, though each word weighed more than the next. He called it self-defense, because that was easier than writing the truth. Elijah McCrae's name was never spoken aloud after that. It floated in the valley like smoke that refused to clear. At night, Cutter sat by his fire, pipe in hand, and wondered if he had just buried the last good men this land would ever know. May kept the copper lantern open, though music no longer filled its corners. Travelers still came, drawn by whispers of the duel, by curiosity about the woman who'd watched two brothers die in love's crossfire. She spoke little, smiled less, and each night before closing she placed a single candle on the bar. It was always for both of them, for what she'd lost, and for what she'd taken part in. Up in the high country, Elijah rode through snow and silence, seeking a place untouched by memory. He carried no gun now, just a worn Bible, its pages thin and torn. Nights by the fire, he spoke to his brother's ghost like one might speak to the wind. "If there's peace, I hope you found it first," he murmured. The only answer came in the crack of frozen branches and the howl of distant wolves. When spring came, Cutter rode out to where the duel had taken place. The grass had grown tall again, but the earth still bore 2 dark stains. He removed his hat, bowed his head, and said nothing. Silence, he decided, was the only honest prayer a man could give this land. Behind him the river murmured, carrying winter's melt toward the valley below. The same river that had once whispered under the bridge when the brothers rode home together. Years passed. May's hair silvered. Her hands grew thin. But she never left Bitterroot Crossing. Each winter she lit 2 candles in her window, one for Elijah and one for Caleb. Folks passing through told stories. Some said both brothers had died. Others claimed Elijah still roamed the hills like a ghost. May never corrected them. She simply looked toward the mountains and whispered their names, letting the silence answer. By the time the century turned, Bitterroot Crossing was nearly gone. Its saloon shuttered, its streets claimed by dust and grass. Only stories remained, traded between travelers by firelight. One such man was Thomas Keene, a young journalist riding west in search of lost legends. He arrived with ink-stained fingers and a hunger for truth. The townsfolk told him about the May craze, 2 brothers who'd brought the valley to silence. Some called it tragedy. Others said it was justice. Keene simply wrote, "The West keeps its ghosts close." He found May's saloon boarded shut, a faded sign still swinging above the door. Inside, the air smelled of old whiskey and cedar rot. On the bar lay a rusted candlestick and 2 half-melted stubs of wax. Keene struck a match and lit one. "For the brothers," he whispered. In the wavering light, dust motes danced like spirits stirred from sleep. Keene rode out to the field where the duel had been. The grass grew tall and wild now, but the land still seemed to remember. He knelt, brushed the soil, and found a single spent cartridge, green with tarnish, cold in his palm. "Maybe the West didn't die," he murmured. "It just learned to keep quiet." Above him, clouds rolled across the peaks, like a slow procession, shadows swallowing the light and releasing it again. That evening, Keene found an old woman living in the outskirts. Silver-haired, her voice soft as creased paper. May Delaney, now 60 and near blind, listened as he told her he'd come for the truth. She smiled faintly. "Truth," she said. "All that's left of it is what you carry when you ride away." She handed him a small locket, inside which were 2 faded faces, Elijah and Caleb, side by side, younger than the legend that replaced them. "Tell it kind," she whispered. At dawn, Keene rode east, the Bitterroot peaks shrinking behind him. He carried May's locket close to his heart and her story in his journal. When the wind rose, it seemed to carry voices, the echo of gunfire softened by time, the laughter of 2 boys long forgiven. As sunlight spilled across the valley, the land looked almost peaceful. The frontier, it seemed, had finally laid its ghosts to rest.